Hello there, and welcome to the very first episode of A Walk in Society. This is a space that I have created in order to uplift and highlight the voices of Black and non-Black women of color as they navigate through everyday life. Each episode features one woman who is breaking barriers and setting examples of what a more inclusive society should look like. As we navigate through topics that range in industries and lifestyles, I encourage you to stop, listen, and think. What am I doing personally to go beyond the dialogue and contribute to the very fundamental cause that is equality for all in our world? Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down and discussing diversity and inclusion in marketing with Vanessa James. She's an entrepreneur and founder of Vanessa James Media, who works as voiceover actress, brand consultant, and advocate for women of color within many brands worldwide. So we are here with Vanessa James. She is the founder of Vanessa James Media. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, your audio.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you so much for deciding to come on. I was dying to talk to you because I really look up to you and the way you maneuver through the industry. And I think there's just so many things that we can discuss. And what I want to do is obviously continue the discussion beyond just the protest. What can we really do to continue the dialogue and to actually take action when it comes to work? And you're such a media maven and you're so good at branding and stuff. So I did want to start by, first of all, acknowledging your experience within branding and within media as a woman of color.
Yes. Well, for me, I come from a corporate radio background. I spent over a decade at iHeartMedia, where I was in programming, I was music director, and also on the air here in Miami, and transitioned to starting my own company in 2010. I started Vanessa James Media, which was basically a voiceover company that I transitioned into a 360 multimedia company when blogging and brand collaborations and also producing, started to really pop and get popular back about a decade ago. I can't believe it's been a whole decade. Mm-hmm. So my experience as a woman of color in that space has really ranged, right? From being in the corporate space and having to deal with a lot of red tape and, climbing up the corporate ladder as a woman of color. And at that point, because it was an urban format, I was surrounded obviously by a lot of people of color. So it was more an issue of being the only woman in the room a lot. Okay. And having my voice often kind of dumbed down because they feel like it's not as valuable it's not as valuable as the men. Right. And secondly, and really wanting to, and having a moment where I needed to decide, Kat, right? Okay, is this going to be, do I want to spend another decade in that space? So really transitioning to starting my own female-owned company, which is a multimedia company in 2010. I got a chance to see, again, the outsides of not being in the corporate space, but still being able to lend my voice to it. So I started doing a lot of consulting for radio stations, working with a lot of different on-air personalities across the spectrum, and getting a chance to help groom them into how to have better interactions in the corporate space, because a lot of them still are. So that's kind of been my my transition, which I've loved because it allows me to play on both sides. But I obviously have seen a lot as well in terms of just a lack of diversity. And you would think not so much, right, Kat, in entertainment? Yeah. But definitely that's the case. Definitely that's the case. And now working with a lot of brands, I do have to say that I do work with a lot of fabulous brands that understand diversity. They get it. They understand the importance of it. A company like Nissan has an entire diversity arm. It's not just two people. But when you work with a company like that, and then you work with others, you see what lack of diversity really means, Yeah. So when there's an agency that I work with in New York, very briefly, and they represent about 15 beauty brands, and nobody in their boardroom, was a person of color. It was crazy. There was one Latina, and she was the intern. Right. So it's walking into spaces like that and feeling like, okay, it shifted from feeling awkward to almost feeling like, okay, I know that I need to make sure when I come into this space that I'm speaking up for us, because there's no one that looks like me, yet we, people of color, are consuming these products in the billions.
Yeah.
So it's been a mixed bag of emotions over the last week. I feel like I'm being really long-winded with you. Over the last week, navigating through all of that. But as I look back and some of the moments, like, cringeworthy moments I've seen, in terms of people having to address that across the corporate space in marketing and branding and with agencies, it's really forcing agencies to have to step up to the plate in a real way and not just a fluff, and not just have it be about fluff. And it's really forcing agencies to have to pull back the curtain on their lack of diversity. So as uncomfortable as all this is, change is uncomfortable at times, but necessary. I say that all the time, right? And that's what we're seeing and experiencing now. As small as it may be, I'm seeing it. I'm looking at CNBC all day because I trade stocks and do all kinds of stuff like that, and really starting to get into that space. I'm starting to see corporations really step up, Kat, which is really refreshing in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's amazing. I actually, like, throughout the week, you observe so much, especially when you look like me, because you're like, the last thing that I want to do is step in this space. This is such an amazing opportunity for Black people and people of color to really, magnify their voice, and for someone like me who has always been given opportunities to step back and really listen and say, okay, how can I help? And within the things that I observed that really touched me were two things. One, obviously, certain businesses and certain companies that, even though they are spearheaded by a man of color or a woman of color, such as Louis Vuitton, I'm still seeing immense mistakes within these brands. And I'm like, okay, so if they do have now the person of color spearheading this company, what is missing so that, Louis Vuitton should be ahead of the game, in my opinion. They should be ahead of the Gucci's and ahead of, so when I look at that, and then, the whole controversy after when Virgil Abloh only donated $50 to the cause, that was even more of that was putting a magnifying glass on, dude, then what are you doing?
But it's that slap in the face culture that so many people speak about in fashion. Writers of color, it's crazy. Fashion editors of color speaking about the fact that, like, have really called out. I'm sure you've seen across the landscape, just even the last 48 hours, Kat. Bon Appetit magazine's been called out. Anna Wintour called out herself and said, this is something I need to work on, So as well as, I believe, Variety. I believe it was the editor of Variety, but I could be mistaken about that platform. Okay. So I think what it is that Band-Aid culture where they've been called out about it. I mean, we saw it, right, with Gucci and Dior and some of the other brands with just, blatant, like, literally putting production, creating pieces that glorify racism, with their black doll and just all of that a couple years ago. And then H&M having to deal with that, whole controversy a couple years ago. It's that Band-Aid culture, Kat, where I don't think they're really invested, and it shows, and people are calling them out for it. So as horrible as social media can be, because it just can create, like, a lot of cancel culture, I do believe it plays a very important role in holding brands that we as the consumer buy so much into, and that urban culture helps lead. When Jay-Z goes on a platform and he's talking about, creating his own cognac douce because, the champagne was racist. He has it in his lyrics, So at the end of the day, people will gravitate towards that brand, right? When Beyonce or J-Lo walk out on the street and they have fabulous pants, everybody wants to buy them. So I do believe that brands use and almost exploit, not almost, definitely exploit, specifically the high-end ones, right? Exploit people of color until it's time to actually pay up or shut up, until it's time to actually have them on the boards, have them, for instance, why is it that there's only five Black CEOs in all of the top Fortune 500. You could name them with one hand. That's crazy. That shouldn't be the case, And there's no CEO there's no women. There was one, and she was the former CEO of Xerox, and that's it. So we still have a lot of work to do, but I think it's forcing us to pull back the curtain and in a positive way, shed light on, like, real work that needs to be done, not just Band-Aid culture where you're slapping a black face to represent, but you're not really doing the work behind the scenes. And that means from the intern to the receptionist to every level of your corporation, of your business, that you're doing impactful, meaningful work to have people of color represented, to spark new creative ideas and ways of thinking.
Absolutely. And what calls my attention of what you're saying actually goes to the second comment that I read this morning before even hopping on with you, from a friend of mine. Her name is Abba, and she owns Tab PR. She's a Black woman, lives in DC, and does amazing things. She's actually the woman behind Function. She does the PR with Function every year.
Function Fashion?
And Function Fashion, yes. And this morning I read something on her Facebook that said, I don't want you now hiring me because I'm Black.
Right.
It's more like companies aren't actually getting the messaging and all like the depth of it. Now they're like, let's just actually, between the white intern and the Black intern, let's hire the Black intern because diversity. And that's not even.
That's like the exact opposite of the point. It's we want you to just not hire the intern. We want you to genuinely be invested. We want you to say, right, here's the shift that has to happen. That I think that we as a culture, specifically millennials, are going to demand. Because what we've seen as millennials, as much as we don't give them credit for, have really been holding people to the fire, you know, and helping the older generations see things through a new lens and perspective. It's really about saying, okay, let's hire 2 interns, you know, so that we could get two different sets of perspective, and that we're not just checking off a box, but we're hiring people that are qualified. And I get that, you know, obviously companies are scaling down, so positions are going to be harder to come by, but it's got to be about inclusivity and diversity, as well as qualifications. Yeah. Again, not just slapping a Band-Aid, but doing the work.
Yeah, yeah. And then how about brands that maybe don't have a major team that they can go to, where they only have like 1 or 2 people? How can they soak up the tools and the knowledge so that them too on a smaller scale can, you know, can be inclusive and within their messaging and within everything? Because major companies can hire a whole committee, you know, of advisors and stuff. But a smaller company of maybe a Latina woman, us, we are very misinformed, the Latino community, on everything Black related. We're still, you know, all the issues going on with us.
But I gotta shout out the Latinas like you who, you know, have been doing the work. I've been watching very closely to see the people that are really like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I want to be open and I want to listen and I want to be engaged. And that's how you spark real shift and change.
Right.
Shout out to the Latinas.
So when it's companies like that, I say, okay, how could they maneuver? Who can they speak to? You know what I mean? As a brand, because I think these days it's fully important when in marketing and when in branding to either have the knowledge or have someone who has the knowledge on your team, because if not, you're going to end up making ridiculous mistakes like we've seen brands time and time before. H&M with the sweater, with the whole monkey sweater. I could like out of the top of my head name about 5. Yeah.
Look at Adidas yesterday. They got getting called out and called to the carpet for, you know, a lack of diversity and inclusivity, and to the point where one of their senior people at Adidas said, I feel like I'm the token Black person, that you're not really dedicated to diversity and inclusivity. So they're getting called out. Look at CrossFit, you know, Adidas pulling yes, it was Adidas pulling their brand sponsorship because he made a very insensitive comment about George Floyd. So I think to answer your question with regards to how can smaller companies and agencies, even startups, who have smaller staffs and therefore smaller budgets, still work in terms of being more inclusive. Definitely, I think that that's an easy solve. If you don't have a big budget, hire a small consultant, who is at that same level with you, and it can help you scale up and be more inclusive and diverse as you go and grow, right? So it doesn't necessarily that mean that you have to have huge budgets. There's consultants that work on an hourly rate where you can say, look, this is my mission. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what my next quarter looks like. I want to make sure that I am not just checking all the boxes, but I'm really being meaningful, and I'm being deliberate about making sure that diversity and inclusion, which is of course now, the big new trending, keywords, is something that we're actually doing on a daily basis. So I would say hire a consultant that you can afford. There are tons.
And then when it comes to companies that, have a legacy, and therefore Condé Nast has been at the spectrum right now because of various scandals throughout the week, brown face, remarks, so many things that have happened in the past. How valuable do you find it? Because I also saw some controversial discussions about what the letter that Anna Wintour put out, because while some people are saying, well, this is great, she's recognizing it, others are saying, she already knows what's coming. So this is her way of kind of redeeming the situation. How valuable do you find it that companies recognize, that they haven't been all that inclusive at this time?
I hear you. And we're definitely going to have, I would say 80% of the companies, we're going to have that be the situation where at the end of the day, Anna, as much as we love her for being such a pioneer and icon in fashion, and as an editor, I do believe that, here's the thing, I've had a long conversation with people that feel like me. The gatekeepers, the editors, the PR representatives, the marketing representatives, they're the gatekeepers that have been at the forefront of a lack of diversity for so long. So it's like, I'm glad that a lot of them are kind of quote unquote waking up, but they've known what's been going on for a long time. When you're sitting at a round table to discuss, fall trends, and no one on your team looks diverse, whether it be a Latina or a Black man or a Black woman or a trans woman, but you're targeting, and the masses of those dollars are being spent by those very people because they're the trendsetters, the actual consuming trendsetters. It speaks volumes about how you move as a brand and how you move as that individual person. So I would say we have to continue in a gentle way, Kat, because some people are doing the work and we have to give them the benefit of the doubt, but we do have to call people to the carpet. And Anna, I feel like, come on, how long, you've been in the industry now for 3+ decades. Yeah. Like, you've known what's up for a while, and therefore you've known that you could have been the change. So I'm happy that you're being, that you're a part of the change now, but how refreshing would it have been for her to say, hold on a second, a decade ago?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
and I also think, well, she actually came up in a major discussion a few weeks back when a good friend of hers who used to be an editor at Condé Nast came out with a whole book where he dissects his relationship with her. And the way, the way she treated him, he alleges that she kind of cut him off for being overweight. He also happens to be a Black man. So seeing a company like Condé Nast do this now and step down and stuff, I really don't want the whole companies feeling the pressure of saying something and then just not doing anything at all, And I think that's
something for the moment, right? And then going back to business as usual. And I think like that's been the pushback too, which to me has also been so refreshing. Us telling people, I'm so sorry that you want to post your Black Lives Matter box. Yeah. And say have your 8 minutes of plus of silence for George Floyd and the movement, and move forward with business as usual. I think you're going to see consumers call them out and hold them accountable, whether that consumer is that is an artist, right, and the consumer saying, you know what, I'm not going to your tour, I'm not spending my money on your brand, I'm not buying your merch, I'm not buying the new hot headphones that you're promoting because you're not really for me and you're not really for us, So I think there's a lot of inner work, Kat, that a lot of these gatekeepers have to do, and take a look. And if you're an Anna Wintour, it's not just as simple as she may be a racist. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to look around, like I said, and go, well, what has been the reason that all these years I haven't been more inclusive? And is it really a control thing where I just want to be the final say of how things flow in fashion? I don't know, but I think it's causing a lot of introspection. And again, inner work starts with introspection. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt while gently calling them to the carpet, unless they're blatantly out there like, well, forget about you guys. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I even think stepping away from things that we all gravitate to in terms, like as consumers, clothes and shoes, yes. But even when we look at basic necessities such as Band-Aid.
Yes.
Band-Aid, and not having people of color on their team just shows in their products that they don't even think twice.
Think about it. And how interesting is it that they just recently clearly did, because they put out the swatches with all the different shades, and it's again like that obviously was done with either a person of color or a person of color in mind. Yeah. So where have you been? Yeah. You know? So I don't know. It's not an easy, it's not an easy fix, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, Cat, as we know, because every company has different corporate culture. But at the end of the day, what is your value system? Like, what is it? If you're going to be marketing to the masses, and the masses include people of all walks of life and demographics and color, races, then that should be a part of your entire nucleus as a brand.
The ethos, for sure. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you. Is there anything that you'd like to recommend personally as someone who's in the industry, whether it be for people that are already in it and are seeking to be part of that change, or people that maybe are in it and are of color and want to integrate themselves? Any recommendations on your behalf?
I definitely would tell everyone to earmark this moment in time, right? The first and the second week of June of 2020, and let's take a look at where we are in September and in December. And I think things have to be really manageable for people. So the 3 causes that are most important to you, maybe it's obviously more inclusion, more diversity amongst your own peers, your circles, your network, and the people that you work with. And then think about the brands, the corporations that you're passionate about, the things that you consume every day. I feel like if we as a collective are holding people accountable, again, gently, because I don't necessarily think that everything has to be aggressive, we can evoke real change. So for me, it's really just telling people to, being a part of lasting change means not going back to business as usual, and really embracing this new normal where diversity and inclusion is no longer a hashtag and no longer a trend, but it is what we do and who we are as a society. That's really the message. So this is, we're in this for the long haul, and we don't want to be tokens. It's time to start taking people of color seriously and understanding that their perspectives and their voices spark creativity and, spark more profits. So get on the train. That's what I would say, and help bring people along who are resistant to jumping on the train.
Amazing. Well, everyone go and follow Vanessa James on, what is your social media?
Yes, across platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's at Vanessa James Media, and my website is vanessajamesmedia.com. And thank you for having me.
No, thank you. It's been such a pleasure learning and hearing you out, and whatever you need, please feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Kat.
All right, Vanessa. See you soon. Okay. Have a great day.
Sure.